stuff from today's guest. This is another one of the 10K Collective interviews. We're here to get you from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 figures in your Amazon private label business and hopefully get a 7-figure exit one day as well, but certainly growing the business. We are talking today with Marvin Harris of ovals.io, and we're going to be talking about how to become your category king on Amazon. Pretty cool subject. Marvin,
Mhm.
thanks for coming on live with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. So anytime I can add some value for people, I'm more than happy. So I'm excited to kind of go over this topic and see where it takes us. Yeah.
Look forward to it. Yeah, me too. So,
Mhm.
if you're watching live on the replay on social media, then you can pop in comments, which if I can catch them on our platform here, I can weave into the subject to the show. Or you can ask questions after the live, in which case then we'll try and, Marvin or I will try and, loop round and catch you and give you some thoughts on your questions. Just make sure it's relevant to the topic. So don't ask me whether you should start a retail arbitrage business. That's not what we're discussing here today. Okay, good question, but we're not discussing
yeah, there's
that.
no problem with that, but just it may
Yeah.
not be in this form. That's all. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly right.
yeah.
Exactly right. Good.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's get this podcast recorded as usual, folks. You'll be watching basically a live podcast recording as well. So that's the main thing we're doing here. So here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to get you from 6 to 7 figures in your Amazon private label business. Today, we are talking to Marvin Harris of ovals.io, very sharp, intelligent chap, very good at strategic thinking, who we've had on before. And we've got back in this time to talk about how to become your Amazon category king, which is a much more attractive prospect than scrabbling around from scraps and little crumbs from the high table, which a lot of us have experienced. It's much more fun to be the king. So, Marvin, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I definitely I think it's really needed, especially with the recession and everything coming, and even my experiences as an entrepreneur. Like some of the things that haven't worked out well is because I didn't really think about this before I built things, and then I was scrambling to figure out what my positioning was. And I think if you can rethink that, it can really have a huge impact on what your objective, selling, exiting, and all those things that go with success and growth of a business, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, with you on that. I think I've seen a lot of
Mhm.
success and failures based on, failing to think that stuff through, the niche we're going to. Just before we plunge into that, we ought to
Mhm.
just give you a, maybe 60-second version of who Marvin Harris is and who you are, what your background is.
Uh, I like to call myself a recovering consultant, first of all. But as far as me, I'm a product technology guy. And I like to, I just like to say, I like my mission is to try to find ways to help people from my experiences in business, in my work life. And then I just try to leverage that to try to find value for people. And what that leads me to is I build software products, I build digital products, and I advise people on their businesses in various ways, whether it's operationally or thinking about these things that we're about to talk about. So,
Great. So a little
mhm,
bit outside the Amazon sort of seller bubble, which is useful, I feel.
mhm.
So, nevertheless, this stuff applies so much, doesn't it, on Amazon? So we got some big problems around niche you're talking about, really. So tell
Mhm.
me what the big picture problems are first, and then we'll dive into solutions.
I think you have to start with what is a category king by definition. So somebody who's a category king typically owns 76% of a market, whatever that niche is. And then everybody else fights for the rest. Right. So if you kind of apply that to in an Amazonian type of world, you have to first, figure out who you are and why people buy from you. And then there's those different variants of what's gonna make them loyal. Because Amazon is probably the most inbound traffic source for retail that has ever existed and known to man, right? It's all about the search and intent, right? So you don't have to create intent on Amazon like you would on a typical site. People come for a purpose, and they typically fall into two categories: uh, aspiration and need, right? So how do you become part of that puzzle so you stand out? If I'm selling toilet paper, what's the difference between me and 10 other people that are doing it? The only difference is positioning because you're selling a commodity. And so we have to really think about how can we position ourselves inside the Amazon ecosystem to maximize sales velocity, right? So,
Right. Nice.
so anyway, so
So it's really about being taking huge market share, okay, and
yes,
standing out. So
definitely.
to do that, so tell me
Hmm.
a bit more about the. Let's look at the opposite first. What are the traps we need to avoid falling into? Then what are the problems that people have when they're picking a niche or a market or their overall approach to business? Maybe it's bigger than that. That means they
Uh,
don't end up as the category king.
it always starts because they think they serve everyone and they serve no one. So I give people three simple advice: one customer, one niche, one category. Start there, figure out what that is first, and then figure out the productization and the offer around that, right? Because when people buy something, whether it's retail, services, business, anything online, they have a desired outcome, and it's up to you to position your offer around that outcome versus what you're selling, and that's how you create a niche. But instead of like marketing the product, because there's no distinction between you and anybody else when you lead with the product, because that's not what they're buying.
Yeah,
And,
it's funny. I was just thinking about toilet roll and toilet paper. They're the most commoditized thing there is. I did have some conversation with some Brazilian guy who, during
Mhm,
the pandemic, he was going to make millions allegedly by selling it into America. And I thought, well, if his supply side was cheap enough, maybe he could make it work. We didn't
mhm.
talk again for some reason. But the other thing I'm thinking of is the adverts in the UK. We had adverts for Andrex, which is soft, long, and strong, or something that were the three buzzwords. And they had this cute
Mhm.
puppies running around to the point where really what you were buying is a sort of story about a family in a house with a lovely Labrador sort of
Right,
puppy.
exactly.
And it wasn't really that much to do with actual toilet paper. I mean, and people paid more money for it because they perceived, rightly or wrongly, that they were getting a stronger, longer, and softer kind of experience to wipe their butts with. And amazingly, of course, that was a very valuable business. I don't know if it still is, but it just strikes me that you're so right that it's never just about the product, and you're not really selling a product. I mean, Lee Roll's just not very exciting, but they were selling a whole lifestyle somehow. There you go.
Yeah.
Some
And that's a component of creating a category. There's a lot of different ways it could be demographic based, or I sell toilet paper to, manufacturing businesses with warehouses of X size or whatever. But all these different variants. So what I like to tell people to do is take a simple Google sheet and do this. Uh, create all the column, like whatever your category is. Let's keep with the toilet paper theme. Uh down the rows, your buyers, what all the different things that make up buyers, like the demographics, the industry, why they buy, etc. Everything you kind of think about there. And then across the columns, you think about the company attributes, or if it's not a company, the consumer attributes, right? And then there's a nexus between the generic category, and you keep going down until you find a place where you can stand out and within with your story, right? Because that's really the only thing you have to offer, especially in a because and if people aren't coming for your product from on Amazon, then all you have is your search, right? And you have to present what I call non-obvious insights that people are missing that your consumer cares about.
okay. Could you give some examples of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I'm going to give an example, but I wanted to let you digest that. But so I'll use a generic act. Let's take the toilet paper example that you just articulated. He used storytelling to compare the old way and the new way, because he had insight on the customers that he was targeting, that they cared about that, and there was a market segment large enough for him to create a very valuable business in the US around that, because they weren't buying toilet paper, they were buying emotion, and that's where people buy most. So I'm going to resonate with that because I feel part of that tribe or part of that community, right? And so the product becomes secondary because he's selling comfort. That's really what he's selling, right? And
Yeah, I
so,
guess so. I would say also, and by the way, just to be clear, I'm muddling things up in the way I'm putting things across. The Brazilian guy was somebody who just got in touch with me.
mm-hmm,
Andrex is a pretty big brand in the UK,
right,
at least it was for toilet paper. So
right,
they're not the same people. It's quite a big corporation. It's probably owned by Johnson and Johnson or somebody like that.
right.
But yeah, they were selling, I think, not just comfort, which is a physical product attribute. I can hear the physical product centric people out there going, oh, well, do I need to make a more comfortable toilet roll? But I don't think they were selling that. I think they were selling an identity as a sort of comfortable middle class family with a playful dog and that kind of atmosphere that parents want to have, but often don't. Right, you got screaming kids and
Right.
unhappy people. So I think that's for what it's worth. I think they were selling a whole lifestyle somehow.
Yeah, so you have to tap into that, right?
Mm,
So, and then find that, and the whole point of the exercise I just mapped out in the Google sheet is to figure out a quick and dirty way to get to that place. And then when you find that place, is it enough market to create the value you want to create? And then build, it's not a marketing strategy, it's a business strategy. You build your whole business around it. Do you want this or that? I don't care if it's a one person solopreneur e-commerce business or a large e-commerce business. They all do this. Like even Amazon, they're category king. Why do people go to Amazon? Convenience, frictionless experience. That's what they're buying. Even though there's a million other sites, I mean, I've been on Amazon and bought stuff and paid more, but because it's just the experience, the delivery. I know the trust factor. And so what on a e-commerce site, where do people find trust? Reviews, right? So if you're not sure like to do that exercise, look at your reviews and look for the patterns that are not just what they say, but what you learn from what they say, and compare that to your competitors selling the same things and see what they say about them about the same product, the way, because they're going to talk about the seller experience, right? And from there, that's just a quick and dirty way. You have data just by the fact you get reviews, because that's one of the number one ways people make decisions on Amazon. Like for me, the first thing I do when I go on Amazon, if I don't have intent to go to a specific seller, is I filter for 4 stars and higher. So anybody that doesn't have 4 stars, they just get eliminated from me off the bat. So if your customers are like me and that's a priority, then you have to position yourself around that framing. And then you have to go to the next step. Okay, other 4 star sellers, what else? How else can I distinguish myself? You see what I mean? And so
yeah.
and you perform that exercise and you'll get to a place where you can have create a dominant position, potentially had a potential to create dominant position, because if there's one person like that on Amazon with the scale, there's thousands, tens of thousands, if not more people just like them. And
Okay.
then once you dominate that, then you can repeat the process for another group, but just focus on that one customer. The key is finding that spot.
Yeah, no argument with that. Finding that spot
Mhm.
is the key. So
Mhm.
let me challenge you a little bit here then.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying this is
Mhm.
all you got in your
No,
bag
no, no.
of strategy, but here's the thing. A lot of people will obviously talk about various ways of trying to find a niche. And all of us have heard lots of different podcasts. And if you're like me and all the sellers that I work with, beginner or advanced, we're always obsessing about this because it is so critical. But
Mhm.
it's not easy to, I like the word non-obvious insights that you put there.
Mhm.
How else can we really dig into this? The Google Sheet I like as a sort of starting point. That's great. Reviews, obviously, everyone in the world who's in some way professional at business creation reads those as well. But how do we actually go past that superficial level and really dig into something that's actually got the potential to be really dominant? Because after all, what we've just discussed, reviews, looking at the numbers, making a bit of a decision, is what most people do. But
That's
most people end up with 5% of a market if at best, right? So how do we actually break through into
that's
that
the
next level?
transparent part of it. What I like to tell people is you have to you have to understand a behavior, right? That is really the driver. I like to use a simple example. What is a company like YouTube, for example, what do they track to determine success? Views, right? But before, nobody cared thought about that as a metric on video, right? So let's apply that to an Amazon seller. It's not the reviews themselves, it's the it's the little details behind it. And you have to find the one behavior that is the buying driver. And this is where the what I call non-obvious insight comes in, because you have to, there's a little experimentation and then a little trial and error to this. So if you think about, I'm trying to think of a dumbed down example, like in America, for example, I play fantasy football. So I'll use a dumb example. What I found out when I follow these sports teams, I want to get a good running back. Well, everybody does all this analysis, but it really came down to one factor: age. And nobody talks about that. So what are people not talking about that are really the true indicators of success? And so you have to do that for your business. So what I like to tell people is look at your best customers, or what I call your super consumers, and find and really dig into the top, what I call the top 20%. Forget the other people, the top 20%, and find the commonalities among them. There's a book you can get on Amazon for $7.50. This Eddie Yoon wrote talking about super consumers. And he goes into great detail about the data analysis around this, but there's a whole framework around this. And what I would encourage people to do is find the super consumers, those best customers, because the reason I'm focusing on this is because a super consumer is that person that buys repeatedly from you. They buy everything you offer because they're fans of you, right? And then you have to dig into things about them, the demographic data, how much they spend, what's their average order size, what when they buy toilet paper, do they buy the 12 pack or the 24 pack? Do they subscribe or they don't subscribe? See what I mean? And then you have to, then you'll get to that spot I'm talking about, and then you will find that one thing that nobody is paying attention to that gives you the edge. And the reviews are just the enabler to find that one edge point, because everybody talks about niche, but they don't really understand what that means, because it's one customer. You're selling to one customer, not everybody on Amazon that wants toilet paper.
I think I get it. So really, you're saying look at the reviews or whatever other data you have, I guess, and
Look at your super
did
consumers and back into it.
back
So
into okay. So you find that one metric really that is driving buyer behavior that other people are not aware of, I guess, other
yeah,
competitors.
it's,
Okay.
well, I use I like to use simplified examples, but what I would say is there's a guy I advise. He's a digital seller, not on Amazon, but on another platform. And he found the one behavior that drove whether people needed what he offered was their customers needing what he sold in order for them to do business with them. So he has to track revenue risk as the indicator, because if not, they won't buy what he offers because he has a high ticket offer, right? So if you think about that audience for you, why are people buying from you? You really have to understand that. Or why are they, because if it's your keywords, why are they keying? What are those? You have to find that combination. But it's really about take your top 20%, 20 customers. And when I say top 20%, use this factor. Who has the highest average order size and the most frequency of orders of all of the things you sell? For the one thing that you want to sell the most, that's going to drive your revenue goals for you, right? And that data is in your Amazon account, and you dig down into that. Now look at what they say about you, look at what they score about you, look at what they buy, the frequency of when they buy, look at the inventory velocity you have with those type of customers, and what credit cards what do they use to purchase? Are they using Visa? Are they using, see what I mean? And you'll get a eventually you're going to scale down to then when do they buy? Is it a certain time of year? What's the demographic information of this top 20%? And then you can take that and find what are their ancillary interests to find patterns. Because what you'll end up, and geography is really important. Where are they concentrated in? Right. And if you take the geography combined with what I just talked about, you will get the unique insight. You might find people that, and what search terms are they using if they came across when they first found you? See what I mean?
I do, yeah. So this is interesting because I guess that what happens was reminded of that story about there's a drunk guy wandering around and the policeman finds him at 2 in the morning and says, sorry, sir, can I help you? And he says, yeah, I'm just looking for my keys. And he's looking under a street light where it's brightly lit. And he says, okay, so you lost them under this street light. And the drunk guy says, no, I lost them over there, but I can't see over there because it's dark. And it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of a lot of Amazon sellers don't bother with demographic type information because it's not easy to get from Amazon. So therefore they obsess about keywords because all the keyword tools give you that easily, right? And I think what you're saying is you got to obsess about the demographic info. One
Because
good thing I
that's
would,
where that's where you're going to get the non-obvious insight.
Mhm.
Because combined with, because everybody's doing the search thing, there's nothing for you to get non-obvious insight if you're doing what everybody else is doing. Where do you get differentiation if you don't do that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think what you're saying is you have to dig into demographics. I mean, one kind of good thing, and I say that with a caveat because
Mhm.
Amazon's just releasing, probably in beta, depending on if somebody's listening to this who's an Amazon
Mhm.
seller, you may or may not have access to it yet. The Amazon Tailored Audience, they just announced it at the Amazon Accelerate conference, which means they're going to give you a lot more information about your followers. In other words, people who haven't even bought from you yet, and also your buyers in terms of, the how often they bought from you, the
Mhm.
the classic, what do you call it, the triple sort of assessment that you'd have to assess the value of somebody on an email list traditionally would be recency, frequency, money, and how often have they bought from you, how frequently, and average order value as well. And all that information is starting to become available to us on the Amazon platform, and that's good and bad. It's good because obviously it gives you insights of exactly the kind you're just talking about there, Marvin. But the bad thing is, of course, your competition is going to start to see them as well. So first, one tactical thing I would say to any Amazon sellers, if you can get into the Amazon tailored audience and deep dive as soon as possible into that demographic data, that's going to get you ahead of your competition. But it sounds like also, really, if we're on a platform that is not very demographic centered like Amazon, I mean, it is, but we don't get to see it as sellers,
You
right?
don't get to see it,
We
but
don't get to see it. How do we find that information out? What are the best ways to
I
actually get
always
that?
encourage people to reach out to customers that have fit, because you can do this. You do know the keywords they used, but think about ancillary things you can use to unmine the information, because whatever you want to find out about somebody, you can find out with today's internet. If I know the person's name, I could easily go on Twitter and see what they're interested in. I could, if I took my top 10, 20, let's say my top 20% customers, and I just randomly selected 20 of them, right? I have their name, right? I have their location. So the geographic data is available without any Amazon tools. And if I have that, I can find out anything, all their interests, the people they follow on social media, other things they buy on Amazon, other keywords they've used to buy other products. And I can back into the demographic data.
So how would you actually go about that in a practical way? You're mentioning
Give me
Twitter.
let's take a real example.
Yeah, good idea.
So I take my, over the last 12 months, let's say I had 1,000 orders. I want to get the top 20 orders, and then I'll start filtering how many of those people ordered from me more than once, right? That's gonna, because that's a velocity. And of the people that have ordered from me more than once, which of those have the largest average order size? And where are they segmented geographically? Are they men? Are they women? You know that you can get that really easily. So now you're getting down to, right? And then based on that, I can I could easily, even if I never, I could actually reach out to those customers and offer some kind of promotion, because people always try to give people Amazon gift cards. So that's commoditized now. But what you can offer is how you can deliver better service by talking to them. What would make this better for you? What would make buying from me better for you? Right? So you could randomly select 5 or 10 of those customers and try to do some kind of outreach for some kind of promotional something. Now you have to decide, but based on that audience, you know what they care about, right? If their average order size is $50, and of all those people, I say, oh, I've noticed over the last 12 months you spent an average order of $50. If you give me if you give me 4 to 6 minutes of your time, I will give you $5 off over to your next 2 orders. Let's say the average order is $50. That's meaningful to them. But I'm only giving this to my super consumers. So you just let them know they're special, right? And if you have their name, I can take their name and search. I can go on some tool like Spark Turo, or what, I can go on Twitter or whatever, and I can learn the demographic data just by doing a quick social media analysis on that person. And now you have the demo data. I can go on Facebook and look them up and get the demo data on them. I can go to their Facebook account and I can find out if they're married. Now, so I'm saying you do not need Amazon to do anecdotal analysis, but you want
Yeah.
to narrow it down as much as you. So basically, narrow with the data you currently have on Amazon, you want to narrow it down as much as you can. Then you want to, the second step is, now you want to take that data and go where the demographic data is. Which social platform, based on that what you sell, is going to give you the most demographic data publicly? Even though nobody uses Facebook, people have profiles on there, right? And I would use something like Facebook or Twitter to find that other demographic information out. You can always go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, people tell you everything about themselves, their interests. You can just find them on LinkedIn and you will find out everything you know, what type of job they have, how old they are, where they work. So you don't need, and now you can build a profile around those commonalities between the 20 people you randomly selected that fit that super consumer profile. And now can I target more people like them? Because now I have ancillary information about them, and now I've created unique insight, not obvious insight, because I've correlated things on other platforms for Amazon. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And by the way, I'm making notes as ever, folks, to just get yourself over to the 10kcollective.com to get the notes here. I really like this because you're starting off with I guess you're putting together two things that are out there and public knowledge, which is reviews on Amazon and Facebook, for example, or LinkedIn or whatever it is. But you're right. I mean, LinkedIn, people will tell you their life history. I mean, I actually find LinkedIn incredibly dull as a platform because it's just so factual. I don't know. There's something very unengaging about it for me, even
Mhm,
though I'm in the business to business space with this
mhm.
podcast.
Right.
But you're right that people reveal amazing amounts of stuff because it's so mundane and harmless seeming. They seem quite unresistant to it, open about it. And actually, of course, it tells you an incredible amount about, who they are and how to sell to them. I like it a lot. I mean, I think what I like about it is it's relatively low tech, but it requires some effort. And I think also, again, to not bang on about the latest Amazon hacks, but the Amazon tailored audience thing is now enabling you. Once again, Amazon keeps going through waves, and I don't know when you're listening to this what the situation will be, but in sort of late 2022, Amazon's going through a wave of opening back up to enable
Mhm.
us as the sellers to communicate directly with the consumers, and that's an amazing opportunity in a
Yes.
very simple way to just A, segment by revenue or average order value or whatever you want, and then B, just send them an offer. And to your point, it's actually become very, very simple. But even if Amazon shut that down, you have to do a bit of extra detective work. But I really like this. As you say, I think that the phrase that's sticking in my mind is the non-obvious insight. I really like that because the obvious insights have already been, seen, cited by the people who use Jungle Scout all day. And I think it's so critical to give yourself an edge. And I really like this. quite a simple idea, really, but it's actually yeah, you've given me some very interesting, simple ways of doing it, which I'm going to really encourage my clients to do. One last thing I ought to ask about: we've talked about, I suppose we've implied that we're talking to people who have data and got sales already. Now, obviously, I've got clients who they may be starting off. I don't tend to work with startups these days, although I
Mhm.
do occasionally. But more often, somebody's got an existing business, but they want to move into a new product category, and therefore they're not going to have the data that we've been talking about, average order value and
That's
things like
true.
that. What would they do, and what would you advise somebody to do in that situation to try your best to home in on a niche without having your own data yet?
Well, coincidentally, I've actually worked with a lot of people that are in that space, in that situation. And what I tell them is they have to create experiments that they run without, do not buy any supply, do not buy any inventory, but they have to find out two things. Who they need to, so what I have them do is the first thing is like, what do you want to, what's the category you want to be in, right? You know that. You can get that easily. Like I want to sell automotive parts, right? But you can do analysis on trends, right? Let's take recession. So here's a dumb, so what one thing I see retailers that don't do all the time that is really impactful is economic indicators. They never add that to the mix, right? So if I was a new person, I have to establish a baseline of what I think, right? And then I have to go through an exercise to prove or disprove what I think is right or not. And so what I have people do is establish what you think is the truth and then go talk to people you think that, but it has to be based on this: one customer, one category, one niche, one offer. Don't have, I sell to all small businesses that 100 million and below. That's not a, so you have to define that perspective and then talk to those people and see if what you think is real, and the things that you think are real become validation points. So what you need to do is create validation points to make it, like I just did this the other day with somebody. He has an offer he wants to create. I say we can do this in a day for no money. So I crafted an email for him. I said, tell me the three things that you know about this customer that you think are true, that would encourage them to buy what you're trying to sell. I wrote an email for him to send out to that audience and the post on his social media. Say, I'm considering launching X because to solve this, this, and this. There's some more context is added to it. This will not be free. Would you be interested in this? And if he sends the email, I say, reply, I'm interested. Or click this link and it sends him a text. It goes to his text message, his WhatsApp for a message letting him know. So, and then he has to build a list of people that he thinks would be, that audience. And you send that out to people, and you can use your socials to do the same thing and see what the feedback is on that. That's a simple way to do it. And if you need help, I always tell people you need to get copywriting help, because I get so many bad emails with bad pictures, and they're too long and they're not focused on the customer. So make sure it's not focused on you, but the customer you think you can serve. And then use things like that require no money for validation points.
I really
You can
like
look
it. Yeah.
you can look at the reviews of the thing you want to sell, and you can see the names of the people. You could message them with that same message. You could build a list from people that have already bought those things.
Yeah, nice. I
See what I
like it a
mean?
lot. And yeah, talking to people, crazy idea. Who would do that? It's it's one of those things that for some reason, people who sell on Amazon with physical products anyway. I mean, books. There are lots of things you can sell. Services on Amazon actually is not something that gets
Mhm.
talked about much, but people who sell physical products are very focused on keywords and digital products, or physical products, I should say. And there's lots of work that goes into that. I can understand why you get wrapped up in it, but they don't talk to consumers or potential consumers enough. I really like that. I think That's such a smart idea to just build a list of people and just offer them something and see if they say yes or no in some form. And as you say, don't buy the inventory first. I like that a lot. I mean, one of the reasons I like it is just de-risks it. I mean, the classic private label model is you do keyword research, you buy a bunch of um, product, and then you test. Once you've spent $30,000 on products, you test whether anyone wants it, which cannot be the right way around, can it? In terms of risk reduction and intelligent scaling, it can't make sense. So I like your approach much better. I really do. So look, we're going to move on to another topic in a second about using inventory to make decisions, which is another
Mhm.
something that is a bit more analytically based. But
Yeah.
so you obviously help a lot of people with the strategy. So what services do you offer, and how do people get hold of you?
Uh, a couple of things. I advise people. So if you need help with that, you can go to my website, marvinharris.com. I have a newsletter, so you can sign up. I send out tips, and also if you want to have a consultation or get in touch with me, I have a link there. You can reach out to me, and I advise people either on a one-time basis or ongoing basis. I also sell digital products. So I help, I have a technology background, so I create digital products for people. And I also help them productize their services, like do what I just talked about and go through the exercise of what I just said, but I do it for them so they don't have to do it themselves. Because I find people need that done for you service. And so I usually have an audit with them. So you can reach out that way. And then I have some software products you can learn about if you go to ovals.io, where I offer inventory solutions, and uh and that's pretty much it. So yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
So advice or consultation, marvharris.com,
Mhm.
marvharris1s
Yes.
dot com.
marvharris.com. Yes. Super.
Marvharris.com. And I like the fact that the stuff we just discussed. I think for some people they'll take it and run with it. A lot of people go, that's too vague for me. I want somebody to actually implement that. So it sounds like you're the guy for that as well, which is really good. I mean, I think spending whatever it is to get some experiment design and intelligent ways of de-risking, maximizing the probability of success is just a super idea when you're looking at the alternative of spending tens of thousands on inventory, or at the very least thousands if you're importing and it's private label. So that strikes me as a really smart thing to do. Brilliant. Well, look, Marvin, we're going to talk about how to use inventory to
Mhm.
make decisions in a second, but for the moment, thank you so much for talking through how to become a category king. Love it.
Uh, my pleasure. Definitely. So.
Cool. Right then, folks. So we're going to plunge into how to use inventory to make decisions.
Mhm.
We'll have to keep it reasonably short and sharp because I've got to dash off soon. I know you got other things to do, Marvin, but so let's get into this straight away. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be to go from mid six to mid seven figures on Amazon. We're talking today with Marvin Harris, who's a very good strategic thinker, but also is a bit of an expert with his software behind him on inventory. And that is really what we're going to talk about today. But it's not so much just using inventory, just managing it as a problem, but how to use inventory to make decisions. So, welcome back to the show, first of all, Marvin. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And so tell me about this first of all. I always think of inventory as one is a problem to solve, or it's just a bunch of numbers that we don't even do anything with if we're unlucky. But we're talking about being a bit more active with using those numbers. So what's that even all about? How come inventory helps with decisions in the first place?
Well, I like to talk about inventory with the old way and the new way. The old way is what you just stated, which falls into the category of what I call systems of record. Hey, we're gonna just record this information and do whatever. The new way is from something I came up with, which is called you need to look at inventory as a means of engagement, customer engagement, or what I call systems of engagement. So you can make decisions faster and you don't put yourself in a weak position because all your cash flow is really tied up in the inventory. And it's the root of the problem all centers around reconciliation. But
Okay.
and we try to so what I tell people to do is we need to use reconciliation to find insight on how we can serve customers better and it will tell us if we're managing our cash flow properly and what people want from us.
Okay, so you can
aka
tell all that from the inventory. You can tell what people
yes,
want. Okay.
yeah, because but people don't look at it in the right way. What they do is they like if I put my let's say my stuff's reconciled and things are out of balance. I don't really have a system of record. You need a place where you aggregate the data from all the places you sell and all the places you have inventory to see and really look at it from what I call a sentiment point of view, a ledger. And this ledger is your algorithm. Like most people use Excel to do this, right? But I don't think it's the most effective way. But what I would recommend people do is use those same strategies as you would and treat it as analytic data because and the one factor you need to look at is economic indicators. I love Twitter because I just, you can find out mentions about a product in by geography. So for example, if there's a spike in cupcake uh in the cupcake ingredients in this specific geography, I want to know that because now I've just figured out that there's increased demand for that product, right? In this specific place. And I can target around that and I can buy around that because people make inventory decisions on what happened yesterday, but consumers are making decisions about the future. And so you have to adapt your inventory about what customers are expecting, not what they did in the past, because their buying behavior adapts as market conditions change, right? And so what you have to use inventory for is to figure that out. And
Okay.
right? Makes sense?
I think it does, yes. So in other words, if you're looking at the data that you're getting, I mean, so a few things to reflect. I mean, really, you're reading, you're making, extrapolating, shall we say, a lot more from the raw data that you're taking out um, consumer insights, really, I guess, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yeah,
And
well, it's
yeah,
consumer insights partly, but
mm,
it's also business management. For example, here in America, since after the pandemic, people bought every retailer I've been to has scaled down what they sell. They stopped selling certain things because they had too much of certain things that people the one measure I always tell people to look at is the accounts receivable aging. That right? If that one metric on inventory will tell you, if you looked at the days outstanding against what you sold, it's going to tell you you have either that's a product that's in demand or not without with anything else. But I've never met one retailer I've worked with that knew that information if I asked them.
yeah,
If
it's pretty obscure. It's buried in the account somewhere, isn't it? I'm sure it's there.
But
The
if you
accountant
track
would have done it.
that gets to the behavior. If you track that one metric by products and SKUs, you would know what people are demanding. And if things are changing, you can do forecasting on that change and against economic indicators. Oh, well, interest rates are going up. What does that mean for my business? Because the two things inventory can teach you is pricing variability and how you need to adapt pricing and what you need to drop, what consumers really care about from you. Like expiration dates is a perfect example. I can track expiration dates against what I just told you, and I know how your store's doing. If you have expiring products, right? Because the dates are everything in inventory. How when it arrived and when it was sold and when how much time I have to sell it, right? And so if you just measure that dates against your inventory, you can get a lot of insight about what you need to do and what you shouldn't do, things you should stop selling because it's not worth it if you really look at the data. And it only takes 3 data points. It's just a time data point and then the cost against that time. Like the longer I keep this, how much is it? It's not worth what I'm doing. Or I made these decisions and interest rates went up 3%. Oh, And by the way, I just noticed my margins went down 20% on this product, but I did not raise my prices.
So tell me about those. What are the three data points we're looking for particularly?
Aging, you need the date from the date received to the date bought, right? And that's irregardless if you have a product that has expiration or not. The second thing, the aging, and you need to break that down by product and then variants. Because for example, if you sell t-shirts in 20 different like I met a guy, I was advising him, he had or made all these t-shirts for all these, because he sold football or soccer jerseys from all these obscure countries in all these places. But I said, well, why did you make this shirt for that small country in Africa? Did you know, was there demand for that? He said, no, I just liked it. So I thought other people would. Don't
Right.
do so.
Yeah.
Don't.
Based on personal preference with no data.
And he had all this inventory, he couldn't move.
Yeah. Because he
But if
liked the
he
shirt.
had analyzed the information, like, okay, well, I'm not gonna there's not enough demand for this, or I have to charge a premium for this customer to make it worth my while, he wouldn't have been stuck with all that inventory. He couldn't move. And that's how you have to treat it. So the three things is dates, market sizing, and the aging. And you have to track the aging, because the date is when the clock is. So for what you sell, how fast do you need to move product? You should have a baseline what that is. Well, from the time I buy this X, I want it to go in 14 days or 10 days or whatever it is for you. And you should be tracking against that the products. And if things aren't doing that, then you can find out why. Then you can get to make a decision as to what's driving that and how you need to adapt your purchasing strategies around it. Because what if you don't do that, you end up having to do markdown strategies. And so the dates feed into the markdown strategy because you don't know. So you end up discounting something 25% or whatever. And if you're tracking those dates, you'll know when you should trigger those things. You can even automate them.
Yeah. And that's something that I hear a lot of, even in amongst, shall we say, the bigger sellers. So the people, certainly the mid six figure sellers, still end up buying way too much inventory of something that they've then got a ton of, and they're trying to work out how to make people buy it at a certain price point, as opposed to accepting reality, which is that they're not aligned. They haven't aligned their purchasing, the amount of stock they've got, with the demand, how quickly they can sell it. So yeah, that's a classic one. And you're right that if you look at the stock, I like this way of looking at it. It's looking at the stock as a way of telling you what the consumers want. I really like that a lot. The one thing I would say that, by the way, if you sell purely on Amazon or mostly, that's not going to be such a helpful metric is the accounts receivable aging, because of course the receivables all come from Amazon and they pay you every 14 days mostly, unless you've got a
Well,
particular way of doing it.
that is true. But what you can do is think of it. You'll have to look at it in net terms. You won't be able to get into details, which is okay. But let's say I bought $20,000 worth of product on October 1st. How much have I in 14 days of that item? I want to have sold a certain percent of what I bought by that time. So you just have to take it a level higher if you don't have the data, right? Because nobody has time to go to that low level detail. You just want enough data so you can make better decisions. So what is that for you? And if Amazon's not giving you the data you need, you just have to go higher, because you can do net cash flow against net out cash flow and net in for that product. You can do that.
Okay. So I confess that net out and net in forecast is not a term I've come across before. So obviously it's the sort of thing that people need to engage with your site, possibly go and check out what you guys do and educate themselves a little bit about
It's all reconciliation, but
it's a
so I would just
reconciliation.
say when it got to the FBA warehouse against, and how long it's sitting there, right? How long
Yeah,
is it sitting there
yeah,
relative to what you had before you added new inventory for that item? Because they're not Amazon's not doing first in, first out. you have no way to track that. So you have to look at it in an aggregate form and just what's the totality of what I have against when I need to replenish, right? And
Yeah.
we all know you want to have what, like they always say 30 days, but I would actually squeeze that down now because there's so much excess inventory out there now. I don't think you can get liquidation values like Target and Nike have what, 65% too much inventory. These big companies can be if you don't know the information, you can look at these big companies forecasts and they're in the industry or sector you're in, and they are telling you what's gonna happen by their inventory volumes. And you can compare that against what's happening with you to get insight on, hey, I'm doing better or I'm not doing so good. I need to figure something out. See what I
Okay,
mean?
so can you give us a concrete example? So I presumed if you're talking about Nike, maybe I'm selling
Uh,
sports tops
I'm
on
I'm
Amazon or something like that. How do
I'm
I?
I'm selling sneaker apparel. I'm
Okay,
selling
great,
sneakers, right?
great.
Nike has identified these type of sneakers are not, we have too much inventory and we have to write it down. Okay. Well, that lets you know there's too much there's low demand and not enough supply for that item. If I'm selling the same type of product, that is an indicator that people are not buying that type of sneaker anymore. How do I need to adapt my strategy around that if I already have bought it? And what, so I don't buy too much of it next go around? Because what are they buying? Right? And then that's, you have to look at it that way. It's an indicator. It doesn't mean it always applies to you. But if Nike, with all that marketing, brand recognition, if they can't move the product, what do you think? Why are you going to move it? You have to have a reason. Is your
Yeah,
audience better?
yeah. Better than Nike. Yeah, that would be going somewhere, wouldn't it? So I guess to summarize, what you're saying is look at what the industry leaders are doing in a particular product
Yes.
category, and if they're struggling with certain things, or they have too much inventory, that's more public knowledge than your Amazon rivals, and therefore you can use that as an indicator of the supply and demand balance in your market as a whole. Is that
But
about right?
and you should look at your own data too. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would definitely do that. And Nike's selling on Amazon too. Even the big retailers, they drive a lot of their traffic. They don't want to do that, but that's just, if 50% of all retail is happening on Amazon, it's an indicator. And another cheap way to look at your pricing is, I tell people, go to Google Shopping, type up the product, and it aggregates all the data, every place it's sold and how much it's being sold for. So why can't you do that?
One of the things that people do, to the previous episode, we talked about trying to get
Mhm,
that be the category king. So in other words,
mhm.
really understanding your consumer to the point where you really tap into, you win a huge amount of market share. And I guess that goes together with the delusion that people get, which is that I can sell my product for a higher price because I'm special in their own minds, as opposed to having a concrete evidence for somebody else who has their wallet in their hand thinks is special, right? So it comes together with that lack of reality check. And but I find it fascinating that you can use inventory in such a way as to read the market. That's quite fascinating, and certainly talking about non-obvious insights, which is another word that comes
Mhm.
from the last episode. That is a non-obvious insight because most people I know, as you say, they don't know many of their numbers around inventory. At least most people don't. The sharpest sellers I know do, the most successful ones, but most people are really hazy about how to even make sense of the numbers. So I like this a lot. So let's just pivot slightly into, we
Mhm.
mentioned the recession or downturn. We're talking about inventory. How do we put those two together? How do we use inventory numbers to help us proof our business against recession and to make sure we come out of it intact?
I always tell people to go to what's happening with their best customers. Everything comes back to understanding your customer. And so if you don't, you need to start. And what's happening with them and how, and the things that are happening with that customer, what's happening that might change their buying behavior with you. So if you, the same process we talked about in the last episode, which is look at your average orders over the last 6 to 12 months. I want you to take all of that COVID excess data out of your equation because now we're back into new things, right? And I want you to analyze those customers from there and who are your best customers. And then I want you to go through the process of understanding the demand, what the future is holding for them. And that's going to give you insight on what you need to be doing from your marketing. Because a lot of our marketing dollars are wasted just because we don't understand the customer. The easiest thing to do, and you have to take your product out of it. You got to focus on the desired outcome. I always tell people, sell offers, don't sell the product or service. So if you're selling, like my mom, she's visiting me and she just told me she just ordered a service provider on Amazon to do some work in her house, right? Like you had talked about, a lot of people don't leverage that. And one of the reasons, but she said it was the best experience she had with a home person in quite a while, right? She didn't mention the service. She talked about his quality of how he delivered it. And when people buy on Amazon, that's what they're buying. So you have to understand that for that best customer, and then you can come up with a strategy to try to expand the number of people that fit into that. What people try to do is be all things to everybody. And what you have to do is find out who the right body is so you can grow and scale around that. Because it,
Yeah.
it it makes your inventory more efficient and the marketing associated with driving the sale of that inventory more efficient. Because you're
Yeah.
gonna strip out a lot of products that you are probably buying for these randoms that don't make sense for you to sell.
Yeah. Like it a lot. And I think you got an interesting way of looking at the world, Marvin, somehow. I think that there's a lot of people that I get on the show who are very precise and good with numbers, and they're accountants or sometimes inventory kind of people. And then you get the other people who get very excited by marketing and customer avatar. I think what's
Mhm.
unique about your approach is that you kind of combining the two in a very, you make it sound simple. I mean, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done to make it work in life, but I do love the basic philosophy.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I try to keep it simple. What I do with people is, like I said, I'll do it for people, and I like to see myself as a teacher. So everybody I work with, I'm big on doing things that people have done for me and to help me think different. I I had met somebody a month or so ago, and he said, "You're not a linear thinker." So my mission is to make more people non-linear thinkers because that's when you can do these. It requires that. But somebody over the years, people have worked with me to help me become a non-linear thinker, and so I can see patterns. I feel like that helps you see the patterns that people miss, but
yeah.
you have somebody has to pull you out of the linear way because that's how we're taught in school.
Yeah, and also how people are taught to set up businesses, and
Mhm,
you know that they're taught, the classic Amazon course, and I've created them
mhm,
myself, and I followed them
mhm.
myself. It's like you got I created like a 20 module course, which is ridiculously far too much for anyone
Wow.
to absorb. I put everything in that I knew, which is a big mistake. But anyway, so it's like module one, module two, module three, module four, and the truth is that there's sort of what's the word, interactions and iterations that happen between, for example, deciding which market you're going to go to, and then when you go and try and source it, you discover that actually you can't source it at that price, so you have to go and look at selling to a different market. Or when you go to your supplier, you find something that you'd never thought of, which you could sell to the same market. And so, in other words, real life is messier, and you have to have a way of thinking that allows for that and gets an edge over the pure linear thinkers. And I think that's what I'm getting from you. So, really
Yeah,
like
you
it.
do.
I like it a lot.
But I've learned from all my failures in my personal life and in my work life. So I call it just experience learning and being super flexible. Because everybody I've ever worked with, the one common theme I see, whether they're solopreneurs or they have partners, they are too me focused, as in them and their product or service. And they and people and honestly, we buy based on none of those things. You have to be about the customer because it's so easy to start a business now. Like to be an Amazon seller is just a couple clicks. So now you have to be to what's going to separate you is these things because most people are too lazy to do the things that we talked about. So if you can't do them, I advise people to get support to do it. Not whether it doesn't have to be me, whoever. It could be a free resource or whatever, because those couple little things could be the difference from me being very successful and being out of business.
I'm into that. Yeah, I
Mm.
agree completely with that. So just remind us, Marvin, what services you offer people if they want to get some help. As you said, sometimes it's impossible to do this stuff on your own, or at least it's harder than it needs to be.
Um, well, like I said, I like to help people. I help people try to find their category, figure out who their customer is, and then build a strategy around what we learn. And that's like from an advisory standpoint, or I find a lot of entrepreneurs just need to talk to somebody to go through these concepts with. So I'm a I coach or advise people around that. And then the second thing is I build technology products to try to deliver some of this value. So I have an inventory product, algorithm I call it, that does some of this stuff that I've just mentioned. And I'm always looking for what I call co-innovation partners, because what I have today is not necessarily what people need tomorrow. So I'm always looking for people who have interesting problems to solve, and I like to use that to create interesting solutions to those problems. So I'm big on doing done for you services, because if not, people just don't do it. So that's what I do.
Yeah, by the way, that's one of the best reasons for hiring somebody because it gets done. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, advice is one of these things. That's the problem with a podcast. I mean, we're bringing you on, you're an expert, you're advising people, you're giving great general principles, but because people listen to it, think it's great, I think it's great. I'm sure a lot of people listening will agree, and then they'll go away and do nothing because they're overwhelmed, they haven't got time. So all I would say is if you want to hit up Marvin to explore whether that might be something worth working on, or just to learn more, I know you've got a load of very helpful information about how to deal with your product inventory, then go to ovals.io. That's OVALZ.io, or Z, depending which side of the Atlantic you're on. Um, Great stuff. Listen, this is really good. There's quite a lot to think about here. I like your thinking is quite subtle. So I would say to anyone listening, go and re-listen to this episode, and you'll discover new things on the second and the third listening, because this is the sort of episode where it's non-obvious. It's not like do this, then do that, then do that, and you get the magic result. It's like
Oh
thinking
yes.
differently, and that takes a bit of mental work. But I think it's really worth it. Really like it. You're taking a small numbers of amount of data and you're extrapolating a large amount of insight. And for me, that's super smart. So I like it very much. Marvin, is there anything haven't asked you that I should have done?
Uh, I don't think anything asked you. I just want to give credit to somebody that helps me be a better thinker, which is Chris Lockhead, and he is somebody I track and follow. So I highly recommend you people following him. He has a podcast and he's really active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And he's the one that wrote an infographic about non-obvious thinking, which got me to realize it's a power source. Because if you're an Amazon seller or an e-commerce person, your biggest asset is your intellectual capital. And to me, that's what you're in the business of, creating more intellectual capital that gets distributed through the products or service you offer through Amazon. And that's what I would leave with. So yeah.
Great. Is that, and Chris Lockhart, is that Lochhead? Is that how you spell it?
Lockhead. He has
Okay.
a podcast called Follow Your Different. Um,
All right.
and he has a newsletter. It's called Category Pirates, and they talk a lot about these concepts, and I've read many of their books, and it's definitely influenced me to where I am today. And so if you don't have a mentor to help you, I'd advise you to get a digital creator to become the mentor. So yeah.
Amazing. Chris Lockhead, Follow Your Different. Sounds really cool. I'll certainly be checking that out. Well, Marvin, it's been really cool to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and look forward to hearing from the listeners who've implemented this stuff. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. Have a great day. And thanks everybody. Mhm.
Thank you very much for those of you who've been following us live or on the replay. As I said, if you want to get hold of Marvin to explore more of the free resources he's got to offer, or indeed to try and book a session to get some advice or get him to and his team to implement stuff for you, ovals.io is probably the best place, right, Marvin? Is that the place, or is it
Yeah.
marvharris.com? Which
Yeah.
one's best?
Marvharris.com or Ovals.io is our software. But if you want to get in touch with me about, some advisory, just hit me up on marvharris.com. So, and I'll be
Amazing.
more
Great. Well,
happy to
thanks
help
for
you.
coming on live with this as well. I appreciate the double dipping here. So yeah, thanks so much. And if you're watching, thank you so much for